Oh,
Nice,
yes.
Ajam.
Hello, sir. How are you, sir? I'm really sorry
I'm good, thanks.
for the delay. I'm really sorry, sir, for earlier.
Oh, no, it's okay.
Oh,
Don't worry about it, Sacham. So Sacham, you're gonna do the podcast live?
no, sir. Actually, I couldn't set it up, so it was the first time doing live. If you have time, we can do it tomorrow, live
No.
or
We can just no, that's
yeah,
okay. If you
yeah,
want, we can record it. I
yeah,
get pretty busy, Sacham, so I don't have too much
yeah.
time.
So yeah, that's
So
why.
we can just record it, and then you
Yeah,
can release it whenever you feel like.
yeah. Okay, sir. That
All
will be
right?
good. Yeah, I know.
Okay. I'll turn my video off as well, and then you have better sound.
Video. Okay, no, it's no problem, sir.
Okay.
It's no problem.
Right.
I rather prefer having you on it.
Oh, you'd rather have video
Yeah,
playing?
yeah. I'm like recording it right now.
Okay, are you doing a screen recording?
Yeah.
Okay, well, let me fix my collar.
Yeah. Okay, sir.
All right. So,
Uh,
okay.
so.
Okay, so you're recording everything on your end. You don't need me to record anything on my side, right?
No, sir.
Okay.
You can if you want to, but it's okay.
Oh, no, I don't
Yeah,
need
yeah.
it. It's fine.
Yeah.
What is your podcast, Sacham, so I can check it out later?
Let's go podcast. So channel's name is STM. I just started like 2 or 3 months. You can check it now. I'll send you the
Good
link.
for you. Awesome. Thank you. Yeah, good for you. Good for doing that.
Yeah, I like before that I used I gave IELTS, and I was like really worried, and I saw your video and really helped me a lot. So like, what better person to ask all these questions rather than you? So that's why I called you and you accepted it. Like I'm really grateful for it. Thank you very much, sir.
You're very welcome. I'm happy to help.
Okay, sir. So can we start right now?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, sure. Whenever you're ready.
So, sir, first of all, how are you doing, sir? How's life there in Canada? You are in Canada right now?
No, currently I'm in Central Europe. I'm in Hungary, Budapest. I'm setting up some offices here, and I will be going back to Canada probably in late spring of next year.
Okay, sir. Sir, is there any like IELTS Academy in Canada also? Like,
There are definitely places to learn IELTS. I don't think there are any specific schools for just IELTS, but a lot of the English as a second language schools have IELTS programs. Even universities have IELTS programs and colleges. So there's definitely a lot of opportunity to learn there. And you know that I offer IELTS help online on our websites, ahelp.com and gieltshelp.com as well.
yes,
So.
yes. So, sir, how did you like it all start with you being an IELTS teacher? Like your journey till now?
It's a
Like
great question.
yeah, you're a like really awesome teacher. Like I've never seen any IELTS teacher giving instruction like you. You know, every teacher say like whenever reading, just skim and scan, look for the keywords, and then you have like very precise strategy for everything. So
Okay,
I really
it's a
want to
good
know.
question. It's a good question. So it's important to go back to my university studies to answer this question. I learned psychology in university, and while I was a university student, I was already tutoring ESL, so just English for students. And after I graduated university, I traveled to Europe and I taught in a couple of different ESL schools. And then when I went back to Canada, I actually first started to specialize in TOEFL, which is the test of English as a foreign language. And TOEFL is very similar to the academic IELTS. For me, both the TOEFL and the IELTS are very clear because in university during my psychology study, I learned about psychometrics. And psychometrics is the study of how to measure human thinking. And of course, language, such as English, is a type of thinking. And there is a very special science behind measuring a person's ability to think in a language or to use critical thinking. So when I look at the IELTS or the TOEFL, I understand exactly what the professionals are doing when they make the test. So test engineering is a special field that mostly psychologists do, not English teachers. And IELTS is made by these kinds of psychometrics experts and not English teachers. And that's why when I look at the IELTS, I can understand what type of thinking they need and what kind of steps they need to achieve good results on the test.
Oh, okay, sir. Oh, that's why like you are like really different from other teachers. Yeah, that's okay. That's why. Yeah, that's a really good point.
Absolutely. So when I look at the IELTS, I think about what can I do. So not just as the teacher, but as the student. So what is my best strategy? What is my best learning? What are my best skills to get a high score on this test? And I only teach strategies or skills that I would also use on the IELTS exam. And to go back to your question, when you said skimming and scanning, I would not use skimming and scanning as a main tool for the reading section because it's not effective. There's too much paraphrasing.
And it's too risky as well. Like we don't feel confident while going to the reading test, and we're like just hoping for the best instead of like really preparing.
Absolutely. And the people who make the test, so these psychologists who make the test, they need a test that's reliable and valid. What that means is that it's measuring the true ability, true English ability of the student. If a student can just skim and scan and match answers with words, that's not a true ability of the English language. So the people who make the test make it very difficult because they paraphrase a lot of the questions and the answers between the reading, and then they will actually use those matching words in different parts that don't give you the right answer. So skimming and scanning can actually waste a lot of time, contrary to what people believe. They think it actually saves them time, but it doesn't. It wastes a lot of time. It's very tiring for the student's brain because they're looking at the questions, looking at the page, looking at the questions, looking at the page, flipping, and it's very frustrating, confusing, and tiring for the brain to do that.
Yeah, and also like let's say like when we study like that, it does not like give growth to our English language because we are just using whatever we know by skimming and scanning.
Absolutely.
We don't feel
it's not
happy like we are learning English and our English does not grow like that. And I was like so demoralized for the first few weeks when the instructor told like that. I was trying hard and still not getting anything, and I was like really afraid. And I saw your channel, luckily your live stream channel, and then I felt like, oh, this makes a lot of sense. And then I really like felt really happy, like my English was increasing. I knew what I was doing, and thank you very much, sir, for that.
Absolutely, you're very welcome. I've had several students tell me that when they actually started to use much better strategies like critical reading, for example, so understanding what a paragraph is about, why it's discussing that, how it works, and focusing on these better skills, I've had a lot of students tell me that their IELTS band score went up at least by half a point, 1 point, even 2 points. So yes, there are much better strategies out there than skimming and scanning. Absolutely.
Yeah. So like there are many students that are really struggling to score their acceptable band, like 6 or 6.5. What should a person do to get an acceptable score in IELTS?
Okay, yeah, that's that's that can be different for different students. I think the best answer I can give you is students really need to identify their areas of weakness. So, of course, the IELTS has all four parts of communication. So it has listening, reading, writing, speaking, and different people have different strengths and different weaknesses. In my experience of more than 10 years specializing in IELTS now, I realized that a lot of students can be divided into kind of two categories. There's one category of students that's kind of shy, and shy students tend to be better in listening and reading because they focus on those. That doesn't require as much confidence. And then there's another group of students who tend to be the more social type of people or outgoing type of people. And those students, of course, they like to speak more, so they use the language more, but maybe they listen less. So those students tend to be strong in the speaking and the writing sections and tend to be weaker in the listening and reading sections. So the first step for a student to reach an overall band score of 6.5 is to really identify, okay, where are my weaknesses, and then target those weaknesses. So focus on those weaknesses, find the correct strategies to improve those weaknesses, and then practice them regularly. Of course, practice makes perfect, so it's very important. And this can be difficult because this sometimes requires the student to really change their personality. So for shy students, it means that they need to be more confident, they need to speak more, they need to look for speaking partners, they need to use the English language as much as possible and not care about what other people think. And for social type people who are very confident and like to just talk and communicate, they need to kind of become more relaxed, focus on more reading, focus on more listening, and not get frustrated and bored and angry at the information. So that's kind of it in a nutshell. It's a very big question to answer, but I think that's the most simple answer I can give you for that.
Okay. Sir, so like if a student has scored 7 bands and he wants to move to 8 or 8.5, what are the steps that he should follow? Like, is it any different?
Absolutely. It's very important for students to look at what the band scores actually mean.
Because
A lot of students think that band score 8 or 9 means that somebody's a native English speaker, and that's not true. Okay, if you look at the IELTS band score descriptions, none of them use the word native English speaker. There's no description like that in the band scores. There are many native speakers who may find it difficult to get 8 or 9 on the IELTS. And a lot of people become surprised. They go, wow, what do you mean a native speaker can't get 8 or 9 on the IELTS? That's because IELTS is not just testing students' English. It's a very important idea that IELTS is not just testing English, it's testing communication skills. And communication skills and English or a language, that's two different parts. So when you're talking about those higher scores, Satyam, like 7, 8, 9, they don't just need somebody to know a lot of vocabulary or grammar. More importantly, it requires that that person is a very good user of the language, so they can communicate very clearly. A 7 is a competent user. That means that they're fairly good at using the language and communicating. An 8 is a proficient user, so it's somebody who's more than just the average when they're using language or the English. And the band 9 means that they're an expert user. Okay, so an expert user is somebody who has not just very good English, but has excellent communication skills. Just to give you an idea of that, to get 9 on the listening or the reading, you can only get maximum 1 point wrong. So you have to either get a perfect score or only make 1 mistake from 40 questions. And believe me, Satyam, that if I gave the IELTS exam today to many native English speakers, even college graduates or university graduates, You might be surprised how many of them would get more than one question wrong.
Okay.
So it really needs students to focus on their communication skills as well as their English.
Okay, sir.
Okay, so when students want to get 8 or 9 on the IELTS, they need to target communication just as much as they target learning English.
So they should use English as much as possible, even in their daily life. Just
They definitely need to use English as much as possible, but beyond using English, and this is especially if somebody's going for 8 or 9, which
yeah.
is, for example, somebody if they want to be a doctor or practice medicine in another country, they will usually need an 8. They need to practice their communication skills. So what that means is if you ask me a question, Satyam,
Yeah.
it's important that I answer your question and not start talking about other ideas.
Oh, okay. So we should not go off topic. I mean,
You should not go off
Oh.
topic. Your answer should be very clear for the question. It should contain quantitative and concrete information as well as qualitative. People tend to communicate with a lot of qualitative information, like I went to visit the pyramids. I'm giving you an example here. So I went to see the pyramids. They were amazing and they were beautiful. Okay, that's okay, but somebody who's very good at communicating will say, I went to see the pyramids. They were very beautiful. The deep orange color of the stone as it reflected the sunlight in the middle of the desert at over 150 meters high was just breathtaking. So that's a much more powerful answer in communication, where it's visual, it's concrete, it's measurable, much better.
oh, okay. Sir, so is it possible to score a 9 on IELTS?
Absolutely. And students do it all the time. So there are, of course, not many, but there are students who get 9 on the IELTS, and it doesn't mean that they're native speakers, and it doesn't mean that they speak perfect English. They speak very good English, not necessarily 100% perfect, but they're very good at communicating. So when they describe to you, for example, in part 2 speaking, their best childhood memory, then that will make you feel like you are there with them. You can see exactly what happened to them when they were a child, and it's like you just read a storybook after they're done speaking with you, and that's why they're able to get 9.
Sir, so what in your opinion do you think are other IELTS teachers getting wrong while teaching their students? In your opinion?
I don't like to criticize other teachers too much. I respect every teacher's effort, and I think it's wonderful that they're passing on their knowledge. However, I definitely feel that one of the biggest missing elements from teachers' lessons or curriculums is they're looking at IELTS like just an English test, and they're not respecting enough that IELTS is more than just an English test. That's why there's 2 versions. So IELTS has an academic version and a general version. If IELTS was simply just an English test, it wouldn't need to be 2 versions. The reason it's 2 versions is because IELTS is testing a type of thinking as well as English. And I think that's one point that a lot of teachers don't recognize, is that there is this critical thinking, there's this active listening, active reading that's involved in the process, the qualitative and quantitative type of speaking. Another point that I think where some IELTS teachers make mistakes is they read or learn about IELTS strategies or skills from the internet or from other teachers, and they don't question whether or not those skills and strategies actually work. And I think that's what happened with skimming and scanning as well, as somebody thought that was a great idea and started passing it on, and other teachers learned that idea. They didn't test it themselves. They didn't think about how useless it is, and they just started to pass it on to students. So I think that for teachers, it's really important to reflect and make sure that any step or strategy they teach to students is actually effective. Just very quickly, Satyam, one other example of that, so I'm not just talking about skimming and scanning, is task 2 writing. So there are basically 4 kinds of essays in English: persuasive, expository, narrative, and descriptive. Every other kind of essay you hear about, like argumentative or storytelling or whatever, that's kind of one of these 4. It's a part of one of these 4. And I'm always surprised to see how many teachers never teach their students that task 2 essay is a persuasive essay written in first person voice. Task 1 essay in the academic is an expository essay written in third person voice. I think that for students who are doing the IELTS, it's very important to learn what these essay types mean and what it means to say first person, second person, third person voice. So when students understand that, okay, I understand what a persuasive essay is and I understand what a first person voice essay is, then it becomes much more clear what that question is asking and how to answer it. So I think that there's a lot of missing pieces of information for teachers in the writing part, for example, where they don't really respect what kind of essays and what kind of voices are required and how to effectively structure essays for those.
Sir, like, for example, if I were to become an IELTS teacher, like, what are the steps that I should take? Or anyone, not only me, anyone.
Doing the IELTS, understanding the IELTS, and understanding what the IELTS is looking for is the first step. So respecting that IELTS is not just a test of English, it's also a test of communication. And then I think it's very important for a person who wants to become a teacher of IELTS to understand some of the technical rules of English literature. So for a good IELTS teacher, it's really important to know grammar rules all the way from basic sentence, where it's subject, verb, object, to complex sentences, to subordinating conjunctions, present perfect, adjective clauses, etc. So all of these different grammar forms are very important to know the majority of these. It's also very important to know the key elements of good communication, as what I mentioned before, like being able to use quantitative language as well as qualitative language. And it's also very important to be able to think from the perspective of the student, so not from the teacher. So thinking about, okay, if I'm a student, what do I see? What do I understand? What is my challenge with this exam? How can I, as a student, feel comfortable and confident in this exam? So, in a nutshell, basically, to become a good IELTS teacher, one has to have a very good technical understanding of English. One has to have good communication or strong communication skills, and empathy for the student or sympathy for the student.
So like you give the spiritual side of like steps for being an IELTS teacher, like for professionally, like is there any course you have to take or?
Okay, I think I definitely think that if somebody is new to teaching, IELTS would not be the right first step. So if somebody is new to the industry of pedagogy or education, they need to, I think, at least for a few years, be a general English teacher. So simply just teach the English language. Teach it to children, teach it to teenagers, teach it to adults, teach beginner English, teach intermediate English, teach advanced English. And I think after a few years of experience with just simple ESL teaching, then that teacher has enough skills in the English language in teaching to start getting more technical with IELTS. So experience is important.
Okay. It's like amazing how much you respect IELTS opposite to like many instructors here. They say like IELTS is just an English test, and it's just amazing to see how much you respect the IELTS test. So talking about like okay.
Go ahead, Satyam, I'm listening.
So like you told about teaching complete beginners. Sir, my mom wants to learn English. So how do I teach her? Like how to teach a complete English to a complete beginner?
Okay.
When I teach
Yes.
like ABCD, she says like it's too simple. I'm not a kid. She says something like that. And when I teach something like sentences, she says it's too complex. I need some time, and I'm like confused how to teach her.
Okay, yeah, okay, yeah. So you're now reminding me of my early days in teaching. So with teaching beginners, there's a lot of the same rules, no matter if it's a beginner, intermediate, or advanced. A very important fundamental rule is that most of us, almost all people, are visual learners. So this is kind of a very broad way to explain this, but all animals have a dominant sense. So as most people know, a dog's dominant sense is its sense of smell. That's how it navigates its world for the most part. And as we developed through the millions of years, different animals chose kind of different senses as their number one tool. Humans are unmatched in the animal kingdom in the way that we use our visual learning, our visual skills. So no matter if you're teaching your mom or if you're teaching your young niece or nephew, using visual tools is very, very powerful. So using pictures, and in the very beginning, you can point at an apple and say apple, and then you can expand on that and say it's a red apple. So so using a lot of visual information, a lot of visual aids is very important. Now also, humans learn by doing. So there's a very wise saying that if I hear, I forget. If I see, I remember. If I do, I learn. So that's very useful in English education as well. So if I hear somebody say apple, I'll just forget it. If I see you show me a picture of an apple, I'll remember that that's an apple. If I have to look at the picture and tell you that's a red apple, I ate an apple yesterday. If I have a real apple in my hand, then you're going to be able to use that information. So with beginners, you want to do a lot of repetition work. You want them to use the language. You want them to say it as much as possible. Use a lot of visual cues and build like Lego the pieces one on top of another. So don't just jump from apple to orange to banana, but go from apple to eat apple or red apple. So build the blocks together. Is that clear?
It's
Makes
pretty
sense.
different, from what I've been doing. So, sir, according to you, what are the qualities of a good IELTS teacher? According to you.
Okay, so that's kind of going back to some of the previous questions you asked me. So the qualities of a good IELTS teacher is a teacher who understands that IELTS requires building students' communication skills as well as their English skills. So a good IELTS teacher will not only focus some classes on building vocabulary, building grammar, building sentence structure, but a good IELTS teacher will also focus classes on helping students to improve their communication. So if the teacher teacher hears the student say a lot of ideas but no clear explanations and examples, then the teacher should stop that student and say, okay, you gave me a very good answer, but you need to explain it more clearly and you need to give me a good example. So build the communication skills with the language skills. A good IELTS teacher needs to be patient. Communication and language can take time to build up, so they need to be patient. They need to be critical thinkers themselves, and they need to encourage their students and help them to understand that IELTS is a very important step to achieve their much bigger goals in life, such as living in another country or going to a good university.
Sir, how do we know that our level of English is improving? Like, it's pretty easy when you're a beginner and you become an intermediate, you see your differences. But when you become intermediate, you don't know whether your level of English is increasing or not.
Yeah, that's very true, Satya. I can actually give you a very simple trick to see whether or not your English is improving. A good trick is take a sample IELTS speaking or even a writing question, write down the essay, record your answers for that those speaking questions on your phone. Make sure to save it. So one of the really important steps to see that your language is improving is keep a record, okay? So know the history of your learning, of your studies. So study English, keep using English, study IELTS, keep improving your scores. And then after 3 months, 4 months, 5 months, 6 months, again, look at either the same or a different question sheet, and then record your answers, write down the essay, and then compare them. Compare the essay that you wrote today with the essay you wrote 6 months ago. Compare the speaking that you recorded today with the speaking that you recorded 6 months ago. And most likely, most people, if they're practicing for those 6 months, will definitely hear a difference in the quality of answers, in the choice of vocabulary, and the way that they write. It's hard to see that without having a record to compare to. So again, in a nutshell, to keep it simple, keep a record and compare it.
Okay. Consistency is the key, so
Absolutely, yeah.
So last question for today. So, if a student were to prepare for IELTS, like, where do we begin?
If a student is absolutely fresh, so it's the first time that they're coming across IELTS, I think the best way to do it is to sit down, take 3 hours, make sure there's 3 hours of available time, and do a full practice exam from start to finish. So in our course on our websites, that's always what we suggest to students who are absolutely new to IELTS, is take one of our 6 exams, sit down, and do it from start to finish. So then you not only learn what the IELTS actually is, but immediately you get an idea of your level today, right now, and then you can identify, okay, what are my strengths, where are my weaknesses, what do I need to do to improve? And as soon as that happens, I think that students should go for as many resources as possible. So in a perfect world, I think that a student who needs to pass IELTS, especially if they need to pass it quickly, they use a good piece of software to study IELTS, like our websites, ahelp.com, glshelp.com. And they also take classes. So they go to an IELTS program at least 4 or 5 times a week, hopefully at least a few hours each day. And if they have the finances and the time available, even a private tutor. So the IELTS should not be taken lightly. It's a life-changing exam. It's very, very important for people. It's not for beginners in English. It's for somebody who's got an intermediate level. And again, like I said, it's testing communication. So there has to be a very clear study strategy in place. Again, Satyam, on our websites, we have a 30 and a 60-day study plan for students to follow. So many years ago, we already realized that students need a schedule. So there needs to be, okay, tomorrow I have 2 hours of reading, Thursday I have 2 hours of listening, and they need to follow that schedule. It cannot be random. It has to be planned. There has to be testing, retesting through the program or through the learning, assessment, feedback. Feedback is very, very important for success. So to wrap it up, somebody who's new to IELTS, sit down, do a practice exam, measure your level, understand the test. As soon as you do that, make a plan. Make a plan of what to do for the next 2 weeks, 2 months, 4 months in order to achieve your goal.
Sir, I'm really sorry. I just have 2 more questions in mind right now. So,
sure.
Sir, how long should we practice for IELTS before giving the exam?
How long and how much?
Yeah.
That's a tough question to answer because, again, it really depends on the actual skill of the student when they start studying, and not just the English skill, but the communication skill as well. Some people are stronger communicators. So it's very difficult to give a general piece of advice. But what I usually say, if somebody has 5.5 and they need to get 6.5 or 7, they should be able to make that improvement if they're studying the correct way, with about 100 days of study, where each day they're investing, let's say, 2 to 3 hours. So 5-6 days a week, 2 to 3 hours each day, for roughly 12 to 15 weeks, and that will be enough to go from a 5.5 to 6.5 or 7.
Sir, one more question. We are like people from Nepal. Can they buy your program as well? Your 30-day program, 60-day program?
Absolutely. Our software is available basically everywhere in the world. They just need to go to aehelp.com. It's academicenglishhelp.com. That's for academic IELTS, or gieltshelp.com, which is generalieltshelp.com for general IELTS. And they can try the course for free. There's a demo version. It has a lot of resources, and then they can also, of course, purchase the full course, and then that includes 100 hours of video lessons, the right strategies, 6 exams, interactive course. So lots and lots of resources there, and it is available in Nepal. We've had quite a few students in the past purchase our course from Nepal and succeed. We've had several students from Nepal who have been successful and written us emails saying that they enjoyed the course and it really helped them. So yeah.
Okay, so thank you very much, sir. Thank you very much for your time.
You are very welcome, Satyam. Thank you for having me on your podcast. I appreciate that. And if you have some further questions in the future, or if anybody wants to contact me, they can also send me an email, Adrian at aehelp.com. That's Adrian at aehelp.com. And Satyam, if you want to do something similar, you have some other questions come up, or you want to target a specific section like reading or listening, that would help people. So let me know.
Yeah, I was actually thinking about that, and you said that, so I'll have you on my show in the future as well. Thank you very much, sir. Thank you very much for the live stream that you have been given, and the course that you have been giving, and of course for today as well. Thank you very much, sir. Hope you have a great day.
Bye.